Welcome to an episode of Monkhouse Mondays, which actually won't go out on a Monday. This is going to go out on a Thursday. We've had so much demand for this, so we're going to do 2 a week. And actually, this will also be the last one that Mike will do, because unfortunately, we've had to make the decision that LeisureNet will furlough Mike as of Friday. So from this way forward, it's just going to be me doing the interview. So I'd now like to introduce to you Martyn Allison. I'm sure many people know Martyn. So Martyn, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Morning, Martyn. Good to see you again.
And you, Mike.
Yeah, I'm just disappointed today about Dave's shirt. If you saw the first episode, he had a lot to live up to in the first episode. He's toned it right down.
It will be back.
Yeah, good. How are you getting on then, Martyn? How are you keeping personally, just to start off with? What are you doing to keep yourself sane and active and healthy?
With difficulty, I think is the short answer. As you know, we'd already been stuck in lockdown for 8 weeks as my wife was recovering from a foot operation. Yeah. So activity was twice round the park in a wheelchair for her, and me doing the pushing as usual. Then a couple of weeks ago, we've hit total lockdown because of my wife's background with cancer. So we're not even venturing into the park. So I'm stuck with caring and gardening, and I'm still.
That sounds like a lot of gardening, especially as the weather gets better. But I guess it's just a reminder, isn't it, that you get this picture that everyone's going out and exercising more and running around the parks and the roads, but there's so many people that are at different levels of this lockdown, and of course you don't see, and to a certain extent you don't hear from the people that are really stuck inside, do you?
Yeah.
Okay, and let's move on to a little bit about the sector then. I guess one of the key things I wanted to ask you, Martyn, was do you think that we are ready now to start looking at recovery and what's going to happen in the future in X number of months' times? Is it too early? And is it specifically too early for those sector organisations like Sport England and SIMSPA? What do you think the role they're going to be playing, both now and in the future?
I don't think it's too early, but we mustn't jump to conclusions. I'll explain a bit more about that at the moment. I think let's just deal with the key one, Sport England. I think they've done probably all they can in the short term. I did have an interesting dialogue last week when I suggested to the hierarchy via Twitter that if they've got all this money to allocate to help save the sector, was they going to be distributing it in accordance with proportionate universalism? Or are they just going to distribute it the way they normally distribute it? Because I think if they was to embrace proportionate universalism and say we're going to give the most to those that's working with the most deprived communities, and we're going to give the least to those that's working with the better off communities, that would send a very powerful message at the moment about change. So I'm going to keep trying to influence and persuade that we start to take decisions now that reflect where we would like to be, not necessarily where we have been. In terms of the rest of them, I think from what I see, they're all trying to give advice and guidance. But I think what's required at the moment is some sense of what the vision is. When we had the round table last week, John Oxley said, problem with planning is all we're facing is uncertainty. So I reread a leadership material that says when you're driving change in a period of uncertainty, the best thing a leader can do is to create a vision.
Yeah.
It might not be the permanent vision, but create one to give somebody a sense of direction and purpose. Again, I think what I would love to say is if Tim and Sport England would suddenly say, we're going to launch our new strategy now. It's not finished. It's not the perfect solution. It hasn't got all the nice photographs in that we normally do. But here is a vision that will take us through what we're going through. And this is where we point. And I think then if the rest of the organisations, instead of doing what they normally do and producing their own visions and competing, if they would actually then row behind that and start to say, right, we can help form and shape this vision. I think that would give us a really useful way forward. And I think what sits behind that thinking for me is, and I deal with this in the paper, reading history and experience. I think people come out of disaster two ways. Some people come out of it by saying, I just want to be back to normal as quickly as possible. You know, you hear it from flood victims. Just rebuild my house and I can get in it. Other people come out of it by saying, bloody hell, sorry, that this is the most awful situation I've been in. The last thing I want to do is to be where I was when we started. Now's the opportunity. And they're the sort of person that looks at their flooded house and said, it never worked. Now's the time to completely revamp it, rebuild it, and turn it in a house that's fit for purpose. What a great opportunity. So I think what we've got to do is decide where in there we want to be as a sector. Okay.
And I think, Martyn, it's really interesting that vision and things like that, and how quickly we've all heard the message that, you know, we've got to stay indoors, we've got to have social distancing, but you can still go out for exercise. You know, it's the one thing that we've been allowed. So how can we as a sector make the most of this opportunity where people who can or who have got access to are actually taking part in exercise, or even being told to take part in exercise? So what can we do to maximise that message that we're hearing every night on the news?
Right. Again, the first thing I'm going to say is it's a bit too early to say.
Okay.
All right. Great messaging. We're all full of hope by what's been said, and we can see this as a great future. We've seen the shoots over the last few years of the health sector gradually embracing the concept of physical activity. Not everywhere, and it hasn't landed everywhere, but where it has. So I think the first thing that will happen after this is our communication and discussions with the health sector will probably be premised on a better understanding, and we don't have to start from, well, where's your evidence?
Okay.
So I think that's the first thing that will happen. The second thing is it's going to be about relationships. So where there has already been strong relationships with the health sector and we've been part of the crisis, then those relationships will build and will continue. Where we haven't, it's going to be a real question of how we reposition ourselves in that emerging health landscape. We know the rebuilding of the acute sector will have to come first. Prevention will be on the back burner for at least a couple of years. Our relationships with the health sector will take time to form. Just two examples: when we did commissioning, a lot of people in the health sector just were skeptical about our seriousness. All you're doing is chasing the money. All you're doing is trying to take the easy solutions, taking the interest. You're not really interested in health inequalities. So if we come to those tables not only with the right message, but the desire to work collaboratively with them, then I think we can build on the message. If we don't, then I'm not sure it will. And if I put it in stark terms, now's the time to decide whether we're in the sport and leisure business or the health improvement business. And if we don't make that decision as part of our vision for the future, we're going to be in real difficulty maximising the opportunity that's been created.
One of the key things that came out of the last MBS conference and the MBS report, Martyn, was that the sector, one of the key weaknesses of the sector, and it's getting worse, is our ability to attract those hard to reach people. You know, and that's got worse over the last 10 years, not better. So do you think this is where the risk, but also the opportunity is, that those people are going to be disproportionately affected by what we're all going through now, because they don't have the advantages that other people have, bigger gardens, access. They're not sitting out in the countryside. They tend to be more in large cities without the benefits and be able to go out and do some of these things. So do you think there's a risk that it could actually get worse if we don't take some really big decisions and make some big changes?
It's a big risk, but it's the one problem that we haven't got a solution to yet.
Mm-hmm.
We've allowed an operator sector to form that is built on good management and good business premises.
Yeah.
When it confronted austerity, it solved austerity, as you know, through MBS by increasing efficiency. But it was only towards the end that we started to identify that it had reduced effectiveness.
Yeah.
As you say, the Marmot report the other week, lost in the virus, but it'll come back. Health inequalities have got worse in some areas. The gap hasn't closed. So if the sector wants to be seen as part of a social movement to address those issues, it's got to be focused at that bottom end of the health inequality. If it can't, then it's got to be able to answer the question about why is it operating elsewhere and not in those areas.
Definitely.
The problem is I haven't yet got a solution to how do we generate income to be sustainable and be attractive and supportive to those communities in most need. So I think this is why I say coming out, if there is a major social and economic and political shift in thinking, as I just said a moment ago to somebody, what if the Prime Minister, as part of the first budget after this, says, physical activity is so important, I am putting X billion on the table to make it free to everybody that needs it to be free. Now, that would really solidify things. So we have got to find an operational solution to this dilemma between are we a business or are we a social enterprise?
Yeah, and I think, Martyn, that really links, I read your article yesterday that you published on LinkedIn and Twitter about repair or renewal, and I thought it was absolutely fascinating. But when I got to the end of it, I thought what I need to ask Martyn is, what do you think the features and benefits of renewal could be? And I think you've indicated there around that, could we put all of that money into making physical activity free? What other benefits and features do you see of renewal? What's your vision for this?
I think it's premised on let's start then. I think all of you know where my values lie and what I believe, and I have been very critical of a sector who have said for 40 years we're all about equity, but have done nothing about equity. And I think that's been fundamentally wrong. We might be good at a lot of things, but we haven't been good at that. So if that's what we've not been good at, but we've told everybody that's what our purpose is, then now's the moment to grasp that and re-engineer ourselves around the purpose that we've been telling everybody for years is what we're about. So renewal for me is about renewing our own values, our own purpose, our own goals, and then having the courage to find the solutions to deliver it, rather than just presenting excuses for why we haven't. That's what I mean by renewal.
Yeah, there's going to have to be considerable re-engineering, repositioning of the way our operators currently work. Because you say they've spent the last 10, 20 years getting very good at marketing, predominantly to the same sort of people, getting them in, refurbishing gyms, changing squash courts into spinning studios, done a very good job at that. And what you're now suggesting is a totally different ball game. There's going to have to be a real shift in consciousness, a shift in management, leadership, I guess, skill set, everything, isn't there?
I think there's only one word there that you mentioned that mattered, and that's leadership. Now's the moment where leadership has really got to come to the, because if we are going to shift and decide we're not going there, we're going to go there, it's all about leadership. And it's not about the leadership we've had over the last few weeks, which is what you do in emergency, which is command and control. We know that works in emergency. I was an emergency planning officer. That's what you do. But once you're outside that emergency, the renewal comes through collaboration, not through competition. So the renewal vision can only be achieved if we change our leadership behaviours. And that's not about just the people at the top. I don't just mean the people who are at the top of these organisations. In fact, they're probably the last people that will make this work. It's the people on the ground collaborating as leaders that will make the difference.
Absolutely, Martyn. And I think that's a really good point to close the conversation. We've been trying to keep these to 10 to 15 minutes, and I think we've done a good job of this one. Martyn, say thank you so much for taking part. If anybody's got any questions or they want to make any comments or they'd like to join us on these conversations, just drop us a line via the social media. We'll be in contact. Martyn, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Good luck to all of you.